The recovery room was cold, sterile, and smelled of disinfectant. My body felt heavy, disconnected, as if I were floating in a fog of anesthesia. When I opened my eyes, a doctor in a white coat was standing beside my bed, his smile so wide it seemed inappropriate for a hospital setting. His words hit me like a physical blow. "You just saved a life, congratulations. Your son authorized the surgery. Your organ has already been delivered." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process what I had just heard. The words echoed in my head like a broken record. Organ, surgery. What surgery? I had come in for a routine checkup. My son Michael had insisted on driving me, saying he wanted to make sure everything was okay with my health. He had been so caring, so attentive. Now this doctor was telling me something that made no sense. Can you imagine waking up in a hospital bed, weak and disoriented, only to discover that someone you trust completely has made the most intimate decision about your body without your knowledge? What would you do if your own child had signed papers to remove parts of you while you were unconscious? My throat was dry, my voice barely a whisper when I asked, "What do you mean?" "I came here for blood tests." "What organ are you talking about?" The doctor's expression shifted slightly, the smile faltering for just a moment. That tiny change in his face told me everything I needed to know. Something was terribly wrong. I remained silent in that hospital bed, my mind racing despite the medication still coursing through my veins. But I already knew that what I would discover in the next few hours would change not only my relationship with my son forever, but would reveal a conspiracy so cruel that it would force me to become someone I never thought I could be. My name is Margaret Elizabeth Harrison. I am 57 years old, a retired corporate lawyer who spent 30 years fighting for justice in boardrooms and courtrooms. I raised Michael as a single mother after his father died when he was 12. I sacrificed career opportunities, moved cities for his education, and used my savings to put him through medical school. I taught him that integrity was more valuable than money, that family was sacred, and that protecting the vulnerable was our highest calling. If only I had known that the most vulnerable person in his life would become me. The anesthesia was wearing off, but the nightmare was just beginning. As I lay there staring at the ceiling tiles, I could hear voices in the hallway. My son's voice, animated and excited, talking to someone about successful procedure and market value, words that shouldn't exist in the same sentence when discussing your mother's body. That's when I understood that the routine consultation had been a lie. The blood tests, a pretense. The caring son who had insisted on driving me held my hand and promised everything would be fine. He had orchestrated the entire thing. But Michael had made one critical mistake. He had underestimated the woman who had raised him, the woman who had spent decades studying human nature in its darkest forms, who knew how to read contracts, follow paper trails, and uncover deceptions, the woman who had taught him everything he knew about strategy and planning. He was about to learn that some lessons, once taught, can never be unlearned. The medication made my limbs feel like lead, but my mind was becoming sharper with each passing minute. 30 years of legal training had taught me that the first hours after discovering deception are crucial. Evidence disappears, stories align, and witnesses develop convenient amnesia. I needed to understand exactly what had happened to me, and I needed to do it while everyone still believed I was helpless. I closed my eyes and regulated my breathing, feigning deep sleep. The voices in the hallway grew closer. Michael's voice, unmistakable even through the morphine haze, carried that tone of controlled excitement I remembered from his childhood when he thought he had gotten away with something clever. "The kidney was in perfect condition," he was saying to someone. "Better than we expected for her age. The recipient is already showing excellent compatibility markers." Kidney. The word hit me like ice water. They had taken my kidney. A woman's voice responded, professional and cold. "Your mother's medical history made her an ideal donor. Clean lifestyle, no smoking, minimal alcohol consumption." The buyer was very specific about those requirements. Buyer. They weren't talking about saving a life through donation. They were talking about selling my organ. My son, the boy I had raised with my own hands, the medical student I had supported through 8 years of education, was discussing the sale of my kidney like a commodity. The betrayal was so profound that for a moment I forgot to breathe naturally. But I forced myself to remain still, to keep listening. "When will she be fully recovered?" Michael asked. The woman replied, "Physical recovery takes 6 to 8 weeks, but at her age, and given the emotional impact when she realizes what happened, many patients experience depression, anxiety. Some never fully adjust to the loss. They were discussing my future psychological trauma with the same detachment they might discuss the weather. That's not my concern," Michael said. And those 5 words shattered something inside me that I hadn't even known was still whole. She has more than enough savings to handle any complications. The important thing is that everything went smoothly and the payment cleared. The payment. My own son had sold my kidney and was discussing the financial transaction like a successful business deal. The child I had sacrificed everything for had literally sold pieces of me for money. But then I heard something that made my blood freeze completely. Another voice joined the conversation, younger, familiar. "Uncle Michael, are you sure she won't figure out what really happened?" It was David, my nephew, my sister's son. The boy I had helped raise after my sister died, the one I had put through college, the one who called me his second mother. "She's getting old, David. Her memory isn't what it used to be. By the time she's fully recovered, we'll have a complete story ready. A medical emergency, life-saving surgery, grateful recipient family. She'll never know the truth." Michael's voice carried absolute confidence. He truly believed he could manipulate me, the woman who had taught him to think strategically. "What about the money?" David asked. "When do we split it?" Split it. This wasn't just my son acting alone. This was a conspiracy involving my own nephew, the boy I had loved as my own child. "The $250,000 is already in the offshore account," Michael replied. "We'll wait 6 months, then gradually bring it back through the investment fund. She'll never trace it. $250,000. That's what my kidney was worth to them. That's what 30 years of love, sacrifice, and devotion had been reduced to." I lay there, listening to them plan how to gaslight me, how to make me believe I was losing my memory, how to slowly steal the money they had earned by selling my body. The most terrifying part wasn't the physical violation or even the financial theft. It was the cold, calculated way they discussed my future psychological manipulation. But as I listened to their planning, something unexpected happened. The shock and pain began transforming into something else entirely. Something colder, sharper, infinitely more dangerous. They had made the classic mistake that I had seen destroy defendants in countless cases throughout my career. They assumed their victim was powerless. Michael and David had no idea that the woman lying in that hospital bed had spent 3 decades learning exactly how criminal minds work, how conspiracies unravel, and how to turn predators into prey. They didn't know that I had friends in the FBI, contacts in financial crimes units, and a network of investigators who owed me favors. Most importantly, they had no idea that Margaret Elizabeth Harrison had never lost a case when she decided someone needed to pay for their crimes. As their voices faded down the hallway, I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. The physical pain from the surgery was nothing compared to the emotional devastation. But underneath both was something my son and nephew couldn't see yet. The quiet, methodical rage of a woman who had just discovered she had raised monsters. They wanted to play games with a retired lawyer? Perfect. I had spent my entire career teaching people like them that some games have consequences they never saw coming. The next morning brought clarity in more ways than one. The medications were wearing off, and with them, any illusion I had harbored about my son's character. A nurse came in to check my vitals, her movements efficient but gentle. I decided to test the waters. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice weak and confused. "I'm having trouble remembering exactly what happened yesterday. Could you help me understand what surgery I had?" The nurse's expression shifted immediately. She glanced toward the door, then back at me with obvious discomfort. "Mrs. Harrison, you should really discuss that with your doctor or your son. They'll be able to explain everything much better than I can." Her evasiveness told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a standard medical procedure with standard protocols. This was something that required careful management of information. "Of course," I replied, settling back into my pillows. "I'm sure Michael will explain everything when he arrives." But Michael wouldn't be explaining anything truthfully, and we both knew it. What he didn't know was that I had already begun collecting evidence. Years of legal practice had taught me that hospitals are bureaucratic nightmares where every decision, every procedure, every signature leaves a paper trail. Someone, somewhere, had documentation of what had really happened to me. I just needed to find it. When the nurse left, I carefully tested my mobility. The incision was painful, but manageable. More importantly, my mind was completely clear now. I reached for the bedside phone and dialed a number I had memorized decades ago. Harrison and Associates, retired partners line. The voice belonged to Patricia Gonzalez, my former assistant who now handled special projects for the firm. Patricia was more than an assistant. She was a woman who understood that sometimes justice required creativity. Patricia, it's Margaret. I need you to listen carefully and ask no questions until I'm finished. I spoke quietly, keeping my voice steady despite the magnitude of what I was about to reveal. I'm in St. Mary's Hospital, room 327. Yesterday, someone performed unauthorized surgery on me and removed my kidney. I have reason to believe it was sold illegally. I need you to come here immediately with a portable recorder, a notary, and contact information for James Mitchell at the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Patricia had worked with me long enough to know when I was deadly serious. Margaret, are you certain about this? The implications of what you're suggesting are exactly why I need you here within the hour. Bring the emergency legal kit from my office safe. You remember the combination? The emergency kit contained tools I had hoped never to use: recording devices, evidence collection materials, and contact cards for investigators who specialized in the darkest corners of human behavior. I'll be there in 40 minutes, Patricia said. Should I contact anyone else? Not yet. First, we gather evidence, then we destroy them. I hung up and immediately called another number, this one more recent in my memory. Dr. Sarah Chen's office. Dr. Chen was my personal physician, a woman I had known for 15 years, someone who would never authorize surgery without explicit consent. This is Margaret Harrison. I need to speak with Dr. Chen immediately. It's an emergency. Within minutes, Sarah's familiar voice came through the phone, filled with concern. Margaret? I heard you were in the hospital, but Michael told me it was just routine monitoring. What's wrong? Sarah, I need you to tell me something, and I need complete honesty. Did you authorize or recommend any surgical procedures for me recently? The silence that followed lasted too long. Margaret, I haven't seen you for 6 months. Our last appointment was routine blood work. Everything was perfect. What surgery are you talking about? Dr. Chen's voice carried professional alarm now. Someone removed my kidney yesterday. They told me it was life-saving surgery that you had recommended. I heard her sharp intake of breath. Margaret, that's impossible. I would never recommend kidney removal without multiple consultations, second opinions, and months of preparation. And I certainly wouldn't authorize surgery without speaking to you directly. This sounds like... She paused, choosing her words carefully. This sounds like medical fraud at minimum. Can you access my medical records from other hospitals? Specifically, anything filed at St. Mary's in the last 48 hours? I can try. But Margaret, if what you're telling me is true, you need to contact the police immediately. Someone has committed multiple felonies. The police will come later. Right now, I need to understand exactly what they did and how they did it. Can you meet me here this afternoon? I'll cancel my appointments and be there within 2 hours. Margaret, I'm so sorry this happened to you, but whoever did this made a serious mistake targeting someone with your background. After hanging up, I sat in the hospital bed, pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to form in my mind. Michael wasn't smart enough to orchestrate something this complex alone. This required medical knowledge, legal documentation, financial structures for money laundering, and institutional connections. This was organized crime masquerading as medical care. But they had chosen the wrong victim. In their greed, they had targeted a woman who had spent 30 years studying exactly their type of criminal behavior. They had attacked someone with the knowledge, resources, and connections to dismantle their entire operation. The irony was almost beautiful. My son had learned strategic thinking from watching me work. Now, he was about to discover that the student would never surpass the teacher, especially when the teacher was fighting for her life, her dignity, and her justice. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Mrs. Harrison? Your son is here to see you. The nurse's voice carried that same careful tone I had noticed earlier. Please send him in, I replied, settling back and arranging my expression into one of confused vulnerability. Michael was about to face the performance of his life, but he had no idea he was about to be cross-examined by someone who had never lost a case. The game was about to begin, and this time, I would be writing the rules. Michael walked into the room carrying flowers and wearing an expression of perfect concern. If I hadn't overheard his conversation the night before, I might have been fooled by the performance. His eyes were slightly red, as if he had been crying. His shoulders carried the weight of a devoted son dealing with his mother's medical crisis. He had always been a good actor. "Mom, thank God you're awake. I was so worried." He approached the bed and leaned down to kiss my forehead, the same gesture he had made thousands of times throughout his childhood. Now it felt like betrayal wrapped in familiar affection. "Michael, sweetheart, I'm so confused about what happened. The doctor said something about surgery, but I don't remember agreeing to anything." I kept my voice weak, slightly trembling, exactly the tone of a frightened elderly woman seeking comfort from her child. His expression shifted subtly, a micro-expression I had learned to read during countless depositions. Relief. He was relieved that I appeared confused and helpless. "Mom, you had a medical emergency. Your kidney was failing, and the doctor said if we didn't act immediately, you could have died. I had to make the decision quickly to save your life." The lie flowed so smoothly from his lips that for a moment I felt genuine admiration for his skill. He had crafted a story that positioned him as a hero, making an impossible choice under pressure. It was exactly the kind of narrative that would make me feel grateful rather than suspicious. A medical emergency? But I felt fine when we came in for the appointment. I watched his face carefully as he processed my response. Sometimes these things happen suddenly, especially at your age. The important thing is that you're going to be okay. The surgery was completely successful, and you'll make a full recovery. He reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "I know it's scary, but I promise I made the right decision." "What happened to my kidney? Did they fix it somehow?" I asked the question with genuine curiosity, as if the concept of organ removal was beyond my comprehension. "They had to remove it, Mom. It was too damaged to save. But people live completely normal lives with one kidney. You'll be fine." Another smooth lie. But this one contained a tactical error. He was explaining away the organ removal too easily, too confidently. "Remove it? You mean it's gone forever?" I allowed my voice to crack slightly, adding just enough distress to seem authentic. "Yes, but Mom, listen to me. You saved someone's life. Your kidney went to a young father who was dying. His children will grow up with their dad because of your sacrifice." The manipulation was breathtaking in its cruelty. He was trying to make me feel proud of being violated. But then he made his first serious mistake. "The recipient's family was so grateful they wanted to make a donation to cover your medical expenses. They gave us $50,000 as a thank you gift." $50,000. Not the $250,000 I had heard him discussing. He was already stealing from the theft. $50,000? That seems like so much money for a family to give to strangers. I watched his reaction carefully. Well, the father is apparently quite wealthy. He wanted to show his appreciation. "I put the money in a special account to cover any ongoing medical costs you might have." Special account. Another lie. The money was sitting in an offshore account he planned to steal. "That's wonderful, Michael. You always take such good care of me." I squeezed his hand back, noting how his palm was slightly damp with perspiration. "Will I get to meet this family? I'd love to thank them personally." His hesitation lasted only a fraction of a second, but it was enough. "The doctors prefer to keep donor families and recipients separate. It's better for everyone's emotional health, but I'm sure they're thinking of you with tremendous gratitude." "Of course. You know best about these medical things." I settled back into my pillows, appearing to accept his explanation completely. "I'm just grateful to have such a caring son who can make these difficult decisions when I can't. I'll always protect you, Mom. You know that." The sincerity in his voice was probably genuine. He likely had convinced himself that stealing from me was somehow protective, that I was too old and frail to handle my own affairs. "I know you will, sweetheart. I raised you to always do the right thing." The irony of my words hung in the air between us. I had raised him to do the right thing, and in his twisted logic, perhaps he believed that stealing my kidney was protecting me from the burden of making difficult decisions. The doctors want to keep you here for a few more days for observation. Then you can come home and start your recovery. I'll take care of everything. Everything. Including gradually transferring the rest of my assets while I was supposedly recovering from surgery. Thank you, Michael. I don't know what I would do without you. But even as I spoke the words, I was already planning exactly what I would do without him. Because after today, he would discover that some relationships, once shattered by betrayal, can never be repaired. If you've ever loved someone completely, trusted them with your life, and then discovered they saw you as nothing more than an opportunity to exploit, you understand the transformation that was happening inside me. Love was calcifying into something harder, colder, infinitely more focused. Michael had taught me that my maternal instincts were a weakness he could manipulate. Now I was about to teach him that a mother's protective instincts, when turned toward justice rather than love, become the most dangerous force he would ever encounter. I'll let you rest now, Mom. I'll be back tomorrow morning to check on you. He kissed my forehead again, and this time I had to control the urge to pull away. I love you, Michael. The words were true, even now, but love without trust is just another word for tragedy. As the door closed behind him, I reached for the phone. Patricia would be arriving soon, and we had work to do. My son thought he had stolen my kidney and gotten away with it. What he had actually done was provide me with the evidence I needed to destroy not just him, but the entire network of criminals he was working with. Some lessons are learned through love, others are taught through consequences. Michael was about to receive his graduate education. Patricia arrived exactly on time, carrying what appeared to be a standard visitor's gift bag, but actually contained sophisticated recording equipment and legal documentation tools. 30 years of working together had taught us to communicate with minimal words and maximum efficiency. "How are you feeling, Margaret?" she asked loudly enough for anyone in the hallway to hear, while simultaneously placing a tiny recording device under my pillow and handing me a legal pad disguised as a get-well card. "Much better. Thank you for coming." I wrote quickly on the pad. "Everything recorded. Need copies of all hospital paperwork. Son stealing money." Patricia's expression remained perfectly pleasant, while her eyes hardened with professional anger. "I brought you some reading material," she said, pulling out what looked like magazines, but were actually folders containing contact information for FBI agents, financial investigators, and medical fraud specialists. "I thought you might be bored." The first folder contained a photograph that made my blood pressure spike. James Mitchell, the FBI agent I had worked with on several corporate fraud cases, had sent his preliminary findings. In less than 12 hours, he had uncovered a network of illegal organ sales operating through 3 different hospitals, with my son and nephew serving as patient recruiters. The second folder contained financial records that Patricia's contacts had accessed through emergency legal channels. Michael hadn't just stolen my kidney. He had been systematically draining my investment accounts for 6 months, using medical emergency documentation to authorize withdrawals. The kidney sale was supposed to be the final theft before I became too confused to manage my own finances. But the third folder contained information that transformed my anger into something far more dangerous: cold, calculating fury. David, my beloved nephew, had been recruiting other elderly patients for the organ harvesting ring. I wasn't his first victim. I was his most recent success in a string of operations targeting vulnerable seniors. "This reading material is very interesting," I told Patricia, my voice steady despite the magnitude of what I was learning. "Especially the article about family dynamics in healthcare decisions. I thought you'd find that one educational. The author has some fascinating insights about how trust can be exploited in medical situations." Patricia was telling me that we had enough evidence to prosecute, but more was coming. "Doctor." Sarah Chen arrived 20 minutes later, her professional composure barely concealing obvious rage. "Margaret, I've reviewed everything I could access from here, and I need to tell you some things that are going to be difficult to hear." "I'm ready for the truth, Sarah. The surgery performed on you was completely unnecessary. Your kidney function was perfect. The medical records they filed were falsified, claiming you had chronic kidney disease and imminent failure. None of that was true." She handed me copies of test results. "These are your actual labs from 6 months ago, and these are the falsified records they used to justify surgery. The falsified records were signed by a Dr. Robert Hendricks, a name I didn't recognize, but Patricia did. She was already making notes on her legal pad. Hendricks, suspended license in 2 states, operating illegally. There's more, Dr. Chen continued. The consent forms for surgery were signed with your name, but the handwriting analysis will show they're forgeries. They didn't just steal your kidney. They created an entire fictional medical history to justify the theft. How many people are involved in this? I asked, though I was beginning to understand the scope of what we were dealing with. Based on what I could find today, at least 12 people. Doctors, nurses, administrators, financial coordinators. This is organized crime disguised as healthcare. Sarah's voice carried professional outrage. Margaret, they've been doing this to other patients. You're part of a larger criminal operation. That confirmation hit me like a physical blow. While I had been mourning the betrayal by my son and nephew, other families were suffering the same violations. Other elderly patients were being targeted, harvested, and discarded by people they trusted. How many others? I asked quietly. Patricia consulted her notes. FBI estimates at least 30 victims in the past 2 years. Most never figured out what really happened to them. They were told they had medical emergencies, life-saving surgeries, grateful recipients. The psychological manipulation prevented them from asking questions. 30 people. 30 families destroyed by the same lies that had been told to me. 30 elderly patients who had trusted the wrong people and paid with pieces of their bodies. What's the total financial damage? I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. Conservative estimate, $4.7 million in stolen organs, plus another $2 million in related financial theft from victims' accounts. Patricia's voice was clinical, but I could see the anger in her eyes. They've been very successful. Until now, I said quietly. Dr. Chen leaned forward. Margaret, I need you to understand something. You have the legal background, the resources, and the evidence to stop this entire operation. But it's going to require you to be stronger than you've ever been. These people will fight back, and they'll use your relationship with Michael to try to manipulate you. Let me be very clear about something, I replied, feeling a calm determination settle over me. The Michael I raised would never have done this to me or anyone else. The person who authorized stealing my kidney is a stranger wearing my son's face. I don't negotiate with criminals, regardless of what DNA we might share. Patricia nodded approvingly. What do you want to do first? I looked at both women, these allies who had dropped everything to help me seek justice. First, we document everything. Every conversation, every medical record, every financial transaction. Then we contact the FBI and give them enough evidence to arrest the entire network. Finally, we make sure every victim gets justice and every perpetrator pays the full legal consequences. And Michael? Dr. Chen asked gently. Michael made his choice when he decided to sell pieces of my body for money. Now he gets to live with the consequences of that choice. I met their eyes steadily. I spent 30 years teaching him the difference between right and wrong. Apparently, he needs a more advanced course in criminal justice. As if summoned by our conversation, my hospital room phone rang. The caller ID showed Michael's number. He's probably calling to check if I'm still too confused to ask difficult questions, I told them, reaching for the phone. This should be interesting. But when I answered, the voice on the other end wasn't Michael's. It was David's, and he sounded panicked. Aunt Margaret, we need to talk, right now. There's been a complication with your surgery, and Uncle Michael doesn't know I'm calling you. I looked at Patricia and Dr. Chen, seeing my own realization reflected in their faces. The criminal network was beginning to unravel, and my nephew was about to become either my greatest source of evidence or my most dangerous enemy. Of course, David. Come right over. I've been hoping to see you. Some conversations change everything. This one was about to change David's life forever. David arrived within 30 minutes, his face pale and his hands visibly shaking. Patricia and Dr. Chen had positioned themselves strategically, Patricia reading magazines in the visitor's chair, Dr. Chen reviewing charts at the bedside table. To anyone watching, we looked like a routine family visit with medical consultation. In reality, we were setting a trap. Aunt Margaret, I need to tell you something, and I need you to promise not to hate me. David's voice cracked like a teenager's, even though he was 28 years old. The recording device under my pillow was capturing every word. David, sweetheart, you could never do anything that would make me hate you. You're like my own son. The words tasted bitter, but I needed him to feel safe enough to confess. Criminals always revealed more when they believed they were seeking forgiveness rather than facing interrogation. That's just it, Aunt Margaret. I don't deserve your love. What we did to you, what I helped Michael do. He collapsed into the chair beside my bed, his facade of composure completely shattered. It was supposed to be simple. Find elderly patients who wouldn't fight back, perform the procedures, make the sales, share the profits. But you're not like the others. What others, David? I kept my voice gentle, maternal, even as my heart was breaking for the victims he was about to describe. There have been so many, Aunt Margaret. Mrs. Chen from Chinatown. We told her she had liver disease and needed emergency surgery. She died 3 weeks later from complications, but by then we had already sold her liver to a buyer in Singapore. His voice was mechanical, as if he were reciting a shopping list rather than describing murder. Dr. Sarah Chen's pen stopped moving across her notepad. I saw her hands clench slightly, but her expression remained professionally neutral. She was memorizing every detail for the FBI report. Then there was Mr. Rodriguez, the veteran who lived alone. Michael convinced him he needed cornea surgery to save his sight. We sold his corneas to a cosmetic surgery clinic in Beverly Hills. He spent his last months completely blind, thinking he had developed sudden cataracts. David was crying now, genuine tears that might have moved me if I hadn't been counting the victims. How many people, David? I asked quietly. 37 successful procedures over 2 years. But Aunt Margaret, you have to understand. We never meant for anyone to get hurt. We chose people who were already isolated, already sick, people who wouldn't be missed if complications arose. His attempt at justification revealed the depth of his moral corruption. What made you think I was isolated and wouldn't be missed? The question carried an edge that made him look up sharply. Michael said you'd been getting forgetful, that you trusted him completely with your medical decisions. He said you wouldn't question anything we told you about emergency surgery. David was revealing their psychological profile of me, the weaknesses they had planned to exploit. And the money, David? What happened to the money from selling my kidney? That's why I'm here, Aunt Margaret. Michael isn't planning to split it with me like he promised. He's keeping everything and disappearing. He's already transferred most of the money to accounts I can't access. David was offering me the ultimate betrayal. Criminals turning on each other when greed overcame loyalty. How much money are we talking about, sweetheart? Your kidney sold for $250,000, but that's just the beginning. Michael has been draining your investment accounts for months, using forged medical power of attorney documents. He's stolen almost $800,000 total. The number hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. $800,000, I repeated slowly. And what was my share supposed to be? David's expression revealed confusion. Your share? Aunt Margaret, victims don't get shares. The money goes to cover medical expenses and facility costs. That's how the business model works. The business model. He was discussing my financial rape as if it were a legitimate enterprise with standard operating procedures. The recording device was capturing not just a confession, but evidence of systematic criminal organization. I see. And what happens to me now, David? What's the next step in your business model? Michael wants to have you declared mentally incompetent. He's already filed preliminary paperwork claiming you're showing signs of dementia and can't manage your own affairs. Once that goes through, he becomes your legal guardian and can access all your remaining assets. David was describing my planned future imprisonment disguised as medical care. That seems very thoughtful of him, I said, noting how Patricia's pen was moving rapidly across her legal pad. And what role do you play in this guardianship arrangement? I was supposed to help monitor your condition, make sure you don't recover enough mental clarity to ask difficult questions. Michael has medications that can cause confusion, memory problems. We've used them before with other patients. They had planned to drug me into compliance, to steal not just my organs and money, but my mind itself. David, I need you to help me understand something. When you look at me right now, what do you see? He studied my face carefully. I see someone I love, someone I've hurt terribly, someone who's probably going to hate me forever once she understands what we've done. What you see, David, is a retired prosecutor who spent 30 years putting people like you in prison for the rest of their lives. My voice remained gentle, but the words hit him like hammer blows. What you see is someone who taught you everything you know about strategy, planning, and consequences. What you see is the woman who is going to make sure you and Michael pay for every single crime you've committed. The color drained from his face as the implications sank in. Aunt Margaret, you don't understand. We're not the only ones involved. There are doctors, hospital administrators, financial coordinators. If you try to fight this, they'll destroy you. David, sweetheart, I said, reaching over to pat his hand gently. You're absolutely right. There are many people involved in this criminal organization, and thanks to your confession, which has been recorded and witnessed by Dr. Chen and my legal representative, we now have enough evidence to destroy all of them. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of David's sharp intake of breath. He looked around the room, seeing Patricia and Dr. Chen with new eyes, understanding for the first time that he had walked into a trap. You recorded this conversation? His voice was barely a whisper. Every word. Along with financial records, medical records, and FBI investigative reports that Patricia brought me this morning. David, you've just provided the final piece of evidence needed to prosecute the entire network. But I'm family. I'm your nephew. I came here to warn you about Michael. You came here because you realized Michael was planning to betray you, just like you both betrayed me. You wanted to cut a deal to save yourself. Unfortunately for you, I don't negotiate with people who sell organs stolen from elderly patients. David stood up suddenly, his panic turning to desperation. You can't do this to me. I'll tell everyone you're mentally incompetent, that you're making up stories because of the medications. You're welcome to try that defense, David. I'm sure it will be very convincing when the FBI plays the recordings of you confessing to 37 cases of organ theft and multiple murders. The transformation in his face was complete now. The crying, apologetic nephew had been replaced by something colder, more calculating. This was the real David, the one who could look elderly patients in the eye while planning to harvest their organs. What do you want from me? He asked finally. I want you to call Michael right now and tell him to come here immediately. Tell him there's been a complication with my recovery and you need his help managing the situation. I smiled at him with genuine warmth. You're going to help me set the final trap, David, because the alternative is spending the next 40 years in federal prison for organized crime, medical fraud, and multiple counts of murder. David looked at Patricia and Dr. Chen, searching for sympathy he wouldn't find. Then he looked back at me, and I saw the moment he realized that the woman he had planned to victimize was about to become the architect of his destruction. Make the call, David. It's time for your Uncle Michael to learn what happens when you underestimate a Harrison woman. David's hands trembled as he dialed Michael's number, the phone on speaker so we could all hear the conversation. Patricia adjusted the recording equipment while Dr. Chen positioned herself to document every word. The next few minutes would determine whether we could catch Michael in a final, irrefutable confession. Michael, it's David. We have a problem with Aunt Margaret. His voice carried just the right amount of panic, though I could see the calculation behind his eyes. Even in confession, he was looking for angles, ways to minimize his own exposure. What kind of problem? I just left her an hour ago, and she seemed completely compliant. Michael's voice came through clearly, his clinical detachment chilling even through the phone speaker. She's asking questions about the money, specific questions. I think someone might have told her something. David was improvising now, trying to create urgency without revealing that he had already confessed everything. That's impossible. She doesn't have contact with anyone who would know details about the operation. Michael's certainty revealed how thoroughly they had planned my isolation. What exactly did she ask? She wanted to know why the recipient family only gave us $50,000 when you told me the kidney sold for $250,000. Michael, I think she's been talking to someone. David was feeding Michael information designed to provoke a more complete confession. The silence on the other end lasted long enough that I thought the call might have dropped. Then Michael's voice returned, harder and more suspicious. David, where exactly are you right now? I'm in her hospital room. She asked me to come over because she was confused about the surgery. But Michael, she doesn't sound confused. She sounds like she's investigating something. Put her on the phone, now. Michael's command carried authority, born of desperation. He needed to assess the threat level personally. David handed me the phone with an expression that might have been apology or might have been calculation. With criminals, the distinction often disappeared under pressure. Michael, sweetheart, I'm so glad David called you. I've been having the strangest thoughts about my surgery, and I need you to help me understand what's real and what might be medication-induced confusion. I pitched my voice to sound uncertain, slightly fragile, exactly the tone of someone questioning their own perceptions. Mom? What kind of thoughts are you having? His voice softened immediately, switching to the gentle, patronizing tone he probably used with all their victims. Well, I keep thinking I heard someone talking about selling my kidney for money. But that couldn't be right, could it? People don't sell organs, they donate them to save lives. I let confusion and hope color my words, as if I desperately wanted him to reassure me that my fears were groundless. Mom, you're absolutely right to be confused. The medications can cause very realistic-seeming dreams and false memories. What you think you heard was probably just your mind trying to process the trauma of emergency surgery. Michael's gaslighting was smooth, practiced, designed to make me doubt my own perceptions. So there wasn't any money involved in saving that young father's life. Well, as I mentioned before, his family did make a generous donation to cover your medical expenses. But that's completely different from selling organs, which would be illegal and immoral. He was walking a careful line, acknowledging the money while maintaining the fiction of legitimate donation. Of course, I knew my Michael would never do anything illegal. I paused, as if gathering courage for a difficult question. But sweetheart, I've been wondering about something else. David mentioned that you've been helping me manage my investment accounts. I don't remember authorizing that. Another pause, longer this time. Michael was calculating how much I might remember, how much I might have discovered, how much danger he was actually in. Mom, you signed the power of attorney documents 6 months ago when you first started showing signs of memory problems. We discussed it with Dr. Hendricks, and he recommended that I take over your financial management to protect you from making confused decisions. Medical power of attorney, forged documents. Dr. Hendricks, whose license had been suspended. Dr. Hendricks? I don't remember him. Is he different from Dr. Chen? Dr. Hendricks is a specialist in geriatric cognitive decline. Dr. Chen referred you to him when she became concerned about your mental status. Another layer of lies, building a fictional medical history that justified everything they had done to me. I see. And how much money have you been managing for me? Don't worry about numbers right now, Mom. The important thing is that everything is being handled properly and your financial security is protected. Evasion disguised as care. He didn't want to quantify the theft. Michael, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. I let my voice crack slightly, as if I were afraid of the answer. Are you stealing from me? The silence stretched so long that David looked genuinely concerned the call had disconnected. When Michael finally spoke, his voice carried hurt surprise that would have convinced me if I hadn't known the truth. Mom, how could you even ask me that? Everything I've done has been to protect you and take care of you. The idea that I would steal from my own mother. He let his voice trail off, as if the accusation was too painful to address directly. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I don't know why I ask that. David says I've been saying strange things all afternoon. I was giving him an excuse to dismiss my suspicions as medication-induced confusion. That's exactly what I was afraid of, Michael said, relief evident in his voice. The medications and surgical trauma can cause paranoid thoughts, especially in elderly patients. Mom, I think we need to have Dr. Hendricks evaluate you for accelerated cognitive decline. Accelerated cognitive decline. The next phase of their plan, the medical justification for declaring me mentally incompetent. They would drug me into confusion, then use that confusion as evidence that I couldn't manage my own affairs. Will that help me feel less confused? Dr. Hendricks has medications that can help stabilize your mental state. They might make you feel a little drowsy at first, but they'll reduce the paranoid thoughts and false memories. Chemical restraints disguised as treatment. They plan to medicate me into compliance. That sounds wonderful, Michael. When can I see Dr. Hendricks? I'll arrange for him to visit you tomorrow morning. In the meantime, try not to worry about money or medical decisions. Just focus on resting and recovering. Translation: Stop asking questions and let us finish stealing everything you own. Thank you, sweetheart. You always know how to take care of me. Should I mention these strange thoughts to the nurses here? No, Mom. Hospital staff aren't trained to handle geriatric psychiatric symptoms. It's better to wait for Dr. Hendricks. He'll know exactly how to help you. Isolation. They wanted to prevent me from discussing my situation with anyone who might recognize the signs of elder abuse. Of course, you know best about medical things. I love you, Michael. I love you too, Mom. Try to get some rest. I'll see you tomorrow morning with Dr. Hendricks. After I hung up, the room fell silent, except for the sound of Patricia's pen scratching across legal documents. David sat motionless, staring at his hands, probably calculating his chances of avoiding life in prison. Well, I said finally, I think we have enough evidence to prosecute everyone involved, don't you think? Dr. Chen looked up from her notes. Margaret, what they just described, the plans for Dr. Hendricks, the medications to cause confusion, that's attempted kidnapping and drugging. Combined with the organ theft and financial fraud, we're looking at federal charges that could result in life sentences. How soon can the FBI move on this? I asked Patricia. James Mitchell can have arrest warrants within 6 hours. But Margaret, you need to understand that once we trigger the arrests, there's no going back. Michael will know that you were never confused, that everything today was a trap. Patricia, my son sold my kidney for money and planned to drug me into mental incompetence so he could steal everything I own. The Michael I raised died the moment he decided I was worth more in pieces than as his mother. I looked at David, who was still staring at his hands. As for David, he just confessed to 37 cases of organ theft and multiple murders. Some relationships don't survive that level of betrayal. David finally looked up, his face a mask of desperate calculation. Aunt Margaret, what if I cooperate fully? What if I help the FBI arrest all the doctors and administrators? Could we work out some kind of deal? I studied his face carefully, seeing not remorse but strategy. Even now, after confessing to systematically murdering elderly patients, he was looking for angles to minimize his consequences. David, the only deal you're going to get is the one the FBI offers you in exchange for your cooperation. And that cooperation had better include testimony against Michael, because if you try to protect him, I will personally ensure that you spend the rest of your life in federal prison. And Michael? Michael made his choice when he decided to harvest organs from his own mother. Now he gets to live with the consequences of that choice, just like his 37 victims had to live with theirs. I reached for the hospital phone. Patricia, call Agent Mitchell. Tell him we're ready to proceed with arrests. And tell him to bring a large team because we're going to need enough agents to take down an entire criminal organization. Some stories end with forgiveness and reconciliation. This one was about to end with handcuffs and justice. Michael thought he had outsmarted his elderly mother. Instead, he had just provided a masterclass in why you should never underestimate a woman who spent her career putting criminals exactly where they belong. Tomorrow morning, Dr. Hendricks would arrive to find federal agents waiting instead of a confused elderly woman. And Michael would learn that some lessons can only be taught through consequences that last a lifetime. Agent James Mitchell arrived at my hospital room at 8 p.m. sharp, accompanied by 2 federal prosecutors and a digital forensics specialist. If anyone in the hospital was monitoring my visitors, it would appear that my condition had taken a serious turn requiring extensive consultation. In reality, we were planning the takedown of a criminal organization that had been operating with impunity for over 2 years. Margaret, I have to admit, when Patricia called me this morning, I thought we were looking at a single case of medical fraud. What you've uncovered is significantly larger. James spread photographs across my bedside table, surveillance photos of Dr. Hendricks, hospital administrators, financial coordinators, and other medical staff. We've been tracking suspicious organ transplant activity for 18 months, but we couldn't identify the source of the illegal organs. How many people are we arresting tomorrow? I asked, studying the faces of people who had built careers on harvesting elderly patients. 14 primary suspects, including Michael and David. But Margaret, I need you to understand something. Once we make these arrests, your safety becomes a concern. Criminal organizations that generate this much money often have resources we haven't identified yet. Patricia looked up from her legal documents. which is why we're transferring Margaret to a secure medical facility tonight, under FBI protection. Officially, she's being moved for specialized care related to surgical complications. What about Dr. Hendricks? Michael is expecting him to visit me tomorrow morning. James smiled grimly. Dr. Hendricks was arrested 3 hours ago at his unlicensed clinic in Beverly Hills. When your son calls him tomorrow, the phone will be answered by federal agents. Michael will be invited to come in for urgent consultation about your condition. And the money? Can we trace all the financial transactions? The digital forensics team has been working on this all afternoon. We've identified offshore accounts in 7 countries, real estate purchases, luxury vehicle acquisitions, and investment portfolios. The total amount stolen from victims exceeds $6.2 million. The prosecutor, a woman named Diana Santos, consulted her tablet. Margaret, your case alone involves $800,000 in direct theft, plus the organ sale proceeds. What happens to the money? David spoke for the first time in an hour, his voice barely audible. Recovered assets go into a victim compensation fund, Diana replied without looking at him. Assuming you provide complete cooperation and testimony against all co-conspirators, you might avoid the death penalty for the murders. Death penalty. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. David's face went completely white as the full implications of his situation became clear. How many victims died as a direct result of the organ harvesting? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. James consulted his notes. 11 confirmed deaths from surgical complications or post-operative infections. 7 more died from complications within 6 months of surgery. The coroner is reviewing medical records for another 12 cases where cause of death might have been related to unauthorized procedures. 18 to 30 deaths. My son and nephew hadn't just stolen organs and money. They had participated in systematic murder disguised as medical care. The magnitude of their crimes was almost incomprehensible. James, I need you to promise me something, I said, meeting his eyes directly. When you arrest Michael tomorrow, I want to be there. I want him to see my face when he realizes that his confused, helpless mother was actually setting the trap that destroyed his life. Margaret, that's not standard procedure. James, I've been working with federal prosecutors longer than some of your agents have been alive. I know what's standard procedure. I also know that victim impact statements and direct confrontation can be powerful tools for obtaining complete confessions. I leaned forward, letting authority color my voice. Michael will confess to everything when he realizes the scope of what we know and who we got the information from. Diana Santos nodded approvingly. She's right. Family confrontation often breaks defendants more effectively than formal interrogation. We can arrange for secure video conference if direct presence is too risky. No video conference. I want to be in the room when he's arrested. I want him to look me in the eye and explain how he justified selling his mother's kidney for money. The steel in my voice surprised even me. 30 years of prosecution taught me that criminals only respect strength. Michael needs to understand that he didn't victimize a helpless elderly woman. He attacked a federal prosecutor with resources he never imagined. James studied my face carefully. Margaret, are you prepared for how he might react? Some criminals become violent when they realize they've been outsmarted. James, I raised that boy from infancy. I know exactly how he reacts under pressure. Michael becomes calculating and manipulative when he's cornered. He'll try to convince me that everything he did was actually for my own good, that I'm too old and confused to understand his sophisticated thinking. I smiled coldly. It's going to be very educational for him to learn that I understood his thinking well enough to record it, trace it, and use it to destroy him. Dr. Chen, who had been quietly reviewing medical records, looked up suddenly. Margaret, there's something else you need to know. I've been in contact with families of other victims, and several of them want to attend the arrests. Mrs. Rodriguez, whose husband was blinded by cornea theft, specifically asked to confront the people who destroyed her family. How many family members? 8 confirmed, possibly more. James, you're going to have victim families who want to see justice done in person. Dr. Chen's voice carried professional anger mixed with personal outrage. These people were told their loved ones died from natural complications of necessary surgery. Now they're learning they were murdered for organ harvesting. The weight of representing not just my own case, but the grievances of multiple families settled on my shoulders. This wasn't just about my kidneys and my money anymore. This was about justice for elderly patients who had been systematically murdered by people they trusted. Diana, can you arrange for victim families to be present during the arrests? We can set up a secure viewing area where families can observe the proceedings without interfering with law enforcement operations. Diana was already making notes. Margaret, given your legal background and your role in developing the evidence, would you be willing to serve as a liaison between the FBI and victim families? Absolutely. These families deserve to see the people who destroyed their loved ones face consequences for their crimes. I looked at David, who was listening to our conversation with growing horror. David, you're going to look at photographs of every victim tomorrow and explain to their families exactly what you did to their mothers, fathers, grandparents. You're going to detail how you selected them, manipulated them, and harvested their organs. I can't do that, he whispered. I can't face those families. Then you can face a jury instead, and we'll let them decide whether you deserve the death penalty or life in prison. My voice carried no sympathy whatsoever. David, you helped murder 18 people for money. The only choice you have left is whether you die in prison or spend the rest of your life there. James gathered the photographs and documents. We'll begin arrests at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Margaret, a protective detail will move you to the secure facility at 11 p.m. tonight. Michael will be arrested when he arrives at the hospital tomorrow morning. What should I expect during the confrontation? Denial, manipulation, attempts to make you feel guilty for betraying your family. He'll try to convince you that prosecuting him will destroy your relationship forever. James had obviously seen these family dynamics before. Margaret, criminals often try to use family loyalty as a weapon against justice. James, my relationship with Michael was destroyed the moment he decided my kidney was worth more than my life. What we're doing tomorrow isn't betrayal, it's consequences. I settled back against my pillows, feeling a calm determination that surprised me with its intensity. Some relationships don't survive discovering that the person you loved never actually existed. As the federal agents prepared to leave, David made one final attempt at manipulation. Aunt Margaret, please. I know what we did was wrong, but I'm still your nephew. I'm still family. I looked at him for a long moment, seeing not the boy I had helped raise, but a stranger who happened to share my DNA. David, family members don't sell each other's organs for money. Family members don't plan to drug their relatives into mental incompetence. Family members don't participate in the systematic murder of elderly patients. But I came to warn you about Michael. You came to cut a deal because Michael was planning to betray you. Your conscience didn't suddenly develop. Your greed just got outmaneuvered. I met his eyes steadily. Tomorrow, you're going to face the families of people you helped murder. If you have any humanity left, you'll use that opportunity to provide them with complete truth and genuine remorse. If you don't, I'll make sure you face the harshest possible consequences for your crimes. After everyone left, I sat alone in my hospital room, looking out at the city lights and thinking about the magnitude of what we had uncovered. Michael and David hadn't just betrayed me. They had betrayed the fundamental trust that holds families and society together. Tomorrow, that betrayal would face justice, and I would be there to make sure that justice was both complete and permanent. Some mothers spend their lives protecting their children from consequences. Tomorrow, I would be teaching my son that some consequences are so severe they can never be avoided, only survived, if they can be survived at all. The secure medical facility was actually a federal safe house disguised as a private recovery center. I spent the night reviewing case files and preparing for what would likely be the most difficult conversation of my life. At 5:30 a.m., Agent Mitchell arrived with bulletproof vests and communication equipment. Margaret, Michael just called the hospital. He's bringing Dr. Hendricks for your 9 a.m. appointment. They have no idea that Dr. Hendricks is already in federal custody. James handed me an earpiece and microphone. You'll be able to hear everything that happens in your former hospital room, and we'll hear everything you say. Where will I be during the arrest? Conference room adjacent to your hospital room, behind one-way glass. You'll see everything, but Michael won't know you're there until we choose to reveal your presence. James studied my face carefully. Margaret, are you absolutely certain you want to witness this? Some people find it traumatic to watch family members be arrested. James, I spent 30 years watching criminals be arrested. The only difference is that this time the criminal happens to share my DNA. I straightened my shoulders, feeling the familiar calm that had always settled over me before major trials. Let's go destroy a criminal organization. The conference room had been set up with video monitors showing multiple angles of my former hospital room. Victim families sat in chairs arranged theater style, their faces carrying mixtures of grief, anger, and anticipation. Mrs. Rodriguez, whose husband had been blinded by cornea theft, sat in the front row clutching a photograph of him from before the surgery. "That's my Samuel," she whispered, showing me the picture. 63 years old, retired teacher, still reading 3 books a week. After they stole his corneas, he couldn't even see my face anymore. He died 6 months later, completely dependent on me for everything. Her voice carried quiet rage. "I want to look at the people who did this to him." At 8:45 a.m., our monitors showed Michael entering my former hospital room, carrying flowers, and wearing the same expression of concerned devotion he had perfected over the past few days. He looked around the empty room with obvious confusion. "Where is she?" he asked the nurse who had accompanied him. "Mrs. Harrison was transferred to a specialized facility during the night for complications related to her surgery," the nurse replied. She was actually FBI agent Lisa Park, and her performance was flawless. "Dr. Hendricks is waiting for you in conference room B." Michael's expression shifted to concern. "What kind of complications? Is she in danger?" "Dr. Hendricks can explain everything. He's just down the hall." Agent Park gestured toward the conference room where we were waiting. Michael walked directly into our trap, his face carrying genuine worry that might have moved me if I hadn't known what he had planned for my future. He entered the conference room and stopped abruptly when he saw federal agents instead of Dr. Hendricks. "What's going on? Where's Dr. Hendricks? Where's my mother?" His voice carried authority and demand, as if he were still in control of the situation. "Dr. Hendricks is in federal custody, Michael. Your mother is safe and fully recovered from the surgery you authorized without her consent." Agent Mitchell stepped forward, handcuffs visible but not yet deployed. "Michael Harrison, you're under arrest for medical fraud, organ trafficking, financial theft, and conspiracy to commit murder." The color drained from Michael's face as he processed the implications. "Murder? What are you talking about?" "My mother is fine. I saved her life with that surgery." "Michael, we're not talking about your mother right now. We're talking about Mrs. Chen, whose liver you harvested and sold, Mr. Rodriguez, whose corneas you stole, Mr. Patterson, whose kidney surgery led to fatal complications." Agent Mitchell read from a list. 37 victims, 18 confirmed deaths, millions of dollars in stolen organs and assets. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a medical professional. I save lives. I don't take them." Michael's denial was immediate and complete, exactly the response I had predicted. "Michael, we have recordings of you discussing organ sales, financial records of the transactions, and testimony from your co-conspirators detailing the entire operation." Agent Mitchell nodded toward the one-way glass. "We also have someone who wants to speak with you." That was my cue. I stood up from my chair and walked around the partition, entering the conference room where my son was about to be arrested. The expression on his face when he saw me was worth every moment of pain I had endured. "Hello, Michael." I kept my voice steady, professional, exactly the tone I had used with defendants throughout my career. "I wanted to make sure you understood who provided the evidence that's going to put you in prison for the rest of your life." "Mom?" His voice cracked like a teenager's. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be recovering from surgery. You're supposed to be confused about what happened." "I was never confused, Michael. From the moment I woke up and heard you discussing the sale of my kidney, I understood exactly what you had done to me. More importantly, I understood what you had been doing to other families for the past 2 years." I stepped closer, maintaining eye contact. "Did you really think you could outsmart a federal prosecutor with 30 years of experience in criminal justice?" "Mom, you don't understand. Everything I did was to protect you, to make sure you were financially secure as you got older. The manipulation was automatic, reflexive, exactly what I had expected. The surgery was necessary to save your life. Michael, stop lying to me. I have recordings of you admitting that my kidney function was perfect, that the surgery was unnecessary, that you sold my organ for $250,000. I pulled out my phone and played a snippet of his confession from the day before. His voice filled the room, discussing organ sales and money laundering with clinical detachment. The sound of his own words hit him like a physical blow. He looked around the room, seeing federal agents, victim families, and video equipment documenting everything. The scope of the trap finally became clear to him. "You recorded me? You've been investigating me?" His voice carried hurt and betrayal, as if I had violated some sacred trust by seeking justice for his crimes. "Michael, you sold your mother's kidney for money and planned to drug me into mental incompetence so you could steal my remaining assets. Did you think I would just accept that quietly?" I let authority color my voice. "You taught me that my maternal instincts were a weakness you could exploit. Now you're learning that those same instincts, when directed toward justice, become the most dangerous force you'll ever face." "Mrs." Rodriguez stood up from her chair, her voice cutting through the tension. "You blinded my husband for money. Samuel couldn't see my face for the last 6 months of his life because you stole his corneas and sold them." Michael turned toward her voice, seeing victim families for the first time. The abstract concept of casualties suddenly had faces, voices, real human consequences he couldn't dismiss or rationalize. "I didn't know patients were dying," he said quietly. "We were told the procedures were safe, that complications were rare." "You were told?" I asked sharply. "Michael, you're a doctor. You knew exactly what those procedures would do to elderly patients. You chose to participate because the money was more important than their lives. Mom, please, I'm your son. You raised me. Don't let them destroy our family over this." His final attempt at manipulation revealed the depth of his delusion. He genuinely believed that family loyalty should protect him from consequences. "Michael, our family was destroyed the moment you decided I was worth more in pieces than as your mother. What's happening today isn't destruction. It's justice." I met his eyes steadily. "You're going to prison for the rest of your life, not because I betrayed you, but because you betrayed everything I taught you about right and wrong." Agent Mitchell stepped forward with handcuffs. "Michael Harrison, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the handcuffs clicked shut around Michael's wrists, he looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, complete comprehension of consequences he couldn't escape or manipulate. "Mom, I love you. I hope someday you can forgive me. Michael, I love the boy I raised, but that boy died when he decided to harvest organs from elderly patients for money. The person wearing handcuffs right now is a stranger who happens to share my DNA." I stepped back as agents prepared to escort him out. Some actions can't be forgiven because they reveal that the person we loved never actually existed. As they led him away, Mrs. Rodriguez approached me. "Thank you," she said simply. "Samuel can rest now, knowing that justice was done." But justice wasn't complete yet. David was still waiting in federal custody, and the rest of the criminal organization needed to be dismantled. Michael's arrest was just the beginning of consequences that would ripple through multiple lives for years to come. Some stories end with redemption and forgiveness. This one was ending with handcuffs and prison sentences, because some crimes are so profound that justice becomes the only form of love that matters. Within 2 hours of Michael's arrest, the entire criminal network began collapsing like a house of cards. Agent Mitchell's phone rang constantly as field teams across the city executed coordinated arrests. Dr. Robert Hendricks, already in custody, was providing detailed confessions in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. The hospital administrators who had facilitated the organ harvesting were being arrested at their offices. Financial coordinators were taken into custody at their banks. "Margaret, you need to see this," Diana Santos called from her laptop. "Hendricks just gave us access to the complete patient database. There aren't 37 victims. There are 63 confirmed cases over 3 years. 63 people. The number hit me like a physical blow. While I had been mourning the betrayal of my son and nephew, dozens of other families had suffered the same violations. Elderly patients had been systematically harvested, their organs sold, their families lied to about medical emergencies and life-saving procedures. How many died? I asked, though I wasn't sure I could handle the answer. 28 confirmed deaths from surgical complications. Another 15 died within 6 months from related medical issues. Diana's voice was clinical, but I could see the anger in her eyes. Margaret, this is one of the largest organ trafficking operations the FBI has ever uncovered. Mrs. Rodriguez was crying quietly, not from grief, but from relief. I knew Samuel's death wasn't natural. He was healthy before that surgery. They told me it was necessary to save his sight, that complications were rare. She looked at me with fierce gratitude. If you hadn't fought back, they would still be murdering people. The conference room had filled with additional victim families as word of the arrests spread through the hospital community. An elderly woman named Elena Patterson approached me, carrying medical records in a manila folder. Mrs. Harrison, my husband Robert died 3 weeks after they removed his kidney. They told me it was emergency surgery to save his life, that kidney failure would have killed him within days. Her voice carried quiet rage. Robert was 72 years old, retired electrician, still working part-time because he loved staying busy. After the surgery, he never recovered. They said complications were normal at his age. What made you suspicious? I asked gently. The money. After Robert died, someone contacted me claiming to be from a grateful recipient family. They wanted to give me $25,000 to honor Robert's sacrifice. Elena's hand shook as she opened the medical folder. But when I tried to contact this family to thank them, I discovered they didn't exist. The phone numbers were fake. The addresses were empty lots. You kept investigating? I hired a private investigator with the insurance money. He found bank records showing that Robert's kidney was sold for $175,000. My husband was murdered for money, and they tried to make me grateful for the privilege. Elena's voice carried steel now. Mrs. Harrison, how many people knew what you were planning? Just the FBI, my legal team, and Dr. Chen. Why? Because 30 minutes ago, I received a phone call from someone claiming to be Michael's lawyer. They offered me $50,000 to refuse to cooperate with federal investigators. They said my husband's death was tragic, but not criminal, that pursuing charges would only cause more pain for everyone involved. Elena handed me a business card. They want to meet with me this afternoon to discuss a settlement. Agent Mitchell looked up sharply from his phone. Elena, did you agree to meet with them? I told them I would consider their offer and call them back within 2 hours. Elena smiled grimly. I thought you might want to be there when I give them my answer. Elena, that's extremely dangerous. If they're offering settlement money 12 hours after the arrests, it means there are aspects of this organization we haven't identified yet. Diana Santos was already making notes. This could be witness intimidation or worse, which is exactly why we're going to that meeting, I said, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that had always accompanied complex cases. Elena, you're going to wear recording equipment and accept their meeting. But instead of a vulnerable widow, they're going to encounter a federal prosecutor with backup. Margaret, absolutely not, Agent Mitchell said immediately. You're not law enforcement. You can't participate in active investigations. James, I'm a victim of this criminal organization, and Elena is asking for my help as a fellow victim. We're not conducting law enforcement operations. We're exercising our rights to seek legal counsel and support. I met his eyes steadily. Unless you're planning to arrest me for providing moral support to another victim? Diana Santos looked thoughtful. Actually, Margaret has a point. If Elena requests legal representation, she has every right to bring counsel to any meeting. The fact that her counsel happens to be a former federal prosecutor with extensive criminal justice experience is just fortunate timing. This is highly irregular, James muttered. But I could see him calculating the advantages of having an experienced prosecutor witness whatever threats or bribes were about to be offered. James, irregular situations require irregular solutions. Besides, if these people are trying to intimidate witnesses, they need to understand that their victims have resources they didn't anticipate. I turned to Elena. Are you willing to help us catch whoever is behind the witness intimidation? Mrs. Harrison? They murdered my husband and then tried to make me thank them for it. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure they pay for what they've done. Elena's voice carried determination that reminded me of my own feelings 24 hours earlier. My phone rang, interrupting our planning. The caller ID showed David's number, calling from federal detention. Aunt Margaret, please, I need to talk to you. They're saying I might face the death penalty. I'll tell them everything I know about the organization, but I need you to help me. David's voice carried pure panic now. David, I'm listening. What do you want to tell me? The doctors, the hospital administrators, they're just employees. The real money comes from overseas buyers, people who purchase organs for private transplant clinics in countries where regulation is minimal. David was talking rapidly, desperately. Aunt Margaret, Michael and I were just recruiters. We found patients and facilitated procedures, but we didn't know about the murders. David, you confessed yesterday to participating in 37 organ thefts. Now you're claiming you didn't know patients were dying. We knew some patients had complications, but we were told that was normal for elderly surgery patients. The death rate seemed consistent with standard medical procedures for that age group. David was trying to minimize his culpability while providing information. Who told you the death rates were normal? Dr. Hendricks and the financial coordinators. They showed us statistics proving that our complication rates were within acceptable medical standards. David was revealing the psychological manipulation used to recruit medical professionals. David, what can you tell me about witness intimidation? Are there people trying to prevent victim families from cooperating with federal investigators? The silence lasted long enough that I thought the call had dropped. When David spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. Aunt Margaret, if they find out I told you this, they'll kill me in federal detention. But yes, there are people whose job is to manage law enforcement exposure. They have resources that go far beyond what Michael and I ever imagined. What kind of resources? Money, political connections, people in law enforcement, judges who owe favors. Aunt Margaret, this organization doesn't just harvest organs. They launder money for international criminal syndicates. The organ sales are just one revenue stream. International criminal syndicates, money laundering, political corruption. What I had thought was a local organ trafficking ring was actually a tentacle of something much larger and infinitely more dangerous. David, who should Elena and I be afraid of when we meet with Michael's supposed lawyer? Anyone offering settlement money right now isn't a lawyer. They're cleaners, people whose job is to eliminate evidence and witnesses. David's voice carried genuine terror. Aunt Margaret, please don't go to that meeting. These people don't negotiate. They eliminate problems. After hanging up, I looked around the room at victim families, federal agents, and prosecutors, all of whom had heard David's warning. Elena Patterson still held the business card from Michael's lawyer, but now we understood that the person she was supposed to meet wasn't interested in settlement negotiations. James, how quickly can you set up a sting operation? I asked. Margaret, after what David just told us, there's no way we're letting you anywhere near that meeting. James, they're expecting Elena to come alone and vulnerable. If she doesn't show up, they'll know their operations have been compromised and disappear. But if Elena arrives with legal representation and recording equipment, we might catch the people who've been cleaning up after this organization for years. Elena Patterson looked at me with fierce determination. Mrs. Harrison, my husband died because I trusted the wrong people. If we can prevent other families from suffering the same loss, I'm willing to take the risk. Some battles are won through strategy and careful planning. Others require courage and the willingness to walk into danger for the sake of justice. Elena and I were about to discover which type of battle we were fighting. But first, we needed to make sure we survived long enough to see justice done. The meeting was set for 3 p.m. at a downtown restaurant, neutral territory, where Elena was supposed to feel safe while discussing settlement terms. Instead, the FBI had transformed the location into an elaborate trap. Agent Mitchell positioned surveillance teams at every exit, while Diana Santos coordinated recording equipment from a van across the street. Elena sat across from me in the restaurant booth, her hands steady despite the wire concealed beneath her jacket. Mrs. Harrison, are you sure about this? David said these people eliminate problems. Elena, they made their first mistake when they chose elderly victims who seemed helpless. Their second mistake was assuming that helplessness equals powerlessness. I squeezed her hand gently. We're about to teach them the difference. At exactly 3 p.m., 2 men in expensive suits approached our table. The older man, distinguished and silver-haired, looked exactly like the high-priced attorney he was pretending to be. The younger man stayed standing, his eyes constantly scanning the restaurant. Security, not legal support. Mrs. Patterson, I'm Thomas Brennan, representing the medical consortium involved in your husband's care. The older man's voice carried practiced sympathy. This is my associate, Mr. Chen. "Please sit down," Elena replied, her voice perfectly controlled. "I brought my legal advisor, Margaret Harrison." Brennan's expression shifted almost imperceptibly when he heard my name. Margaret Harrison? The former federal prosecutor? Former prosecutor. Current victim of the same organization that murdered Mrs. Patterson's husband. I met his eyes steadily. "I assume you're here to offer Mrs. Patterson money in exchange for her silence about her husband's murder?" "Murder is a very strong word, Miss Harrison. Mr. Patterson underwent necessary medical treatment that unfortunately resulted in complications. These things happen in medicine, especially with elderly patients." Brennan's tone remained professional, but I caught the edge of warning. "Mr. Brennan, we have recorded confessions detailing how Robert Patterson was selected for organ harvesting, how his kidney was removed under false pretenses, and how it was sold for $175,000. Elena's voice carried quiet steel. "We also have evidence that your organization has murdered at least 28 elderly patients." The silence that followed was broken by the soft sound of Mr. Chen moving his hand inside his jacket. Agent Mitchell's voice came through my earpiece. "Armed threat detected. Moving in 30 seconds. Mr. Brennan," I said calmly, "I assume you're about to explain that continuing this investigation would be dangerous for Mrs. Patterson and her family?" "Ms. Harrison, some situations are best resolved through mutual understanding rather than prolonged legal proceedings. Mrs. Patterson could receive substantial compensation for her grief while avoiding the stress and uncertainty of criminal trials." His words were polite, but the threat was unmistakable. "What kind of compensation?" Elena asked. $500,000, paid immediately in exchange for a signed agreement that Mr. Patterson's death was the result of medical complications, not criminal activity. Brennan slid a document across the table. "This offer expires in 24 hours. I picked up the document, scanning the legal language designed to prevent Elena from ever discussing her husband's case. "Mr. Brennan, this isn't a settlement agreement. This is a confession that Mrs. Patterson knows her husband was murdered and is accepting payment to cover up the crime." "That's a very cynical interpretation, Ms. Harrison." "It's a prosecutor's interpretation of a document designed to obstruct justice." I set the papers down carefully. "Mr. Brennan, how many victim families have accepted similar offers?" "I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm stating directly that your organization has been paying families to cover up murders. You've been systematically eliminating evidence and witnesses to protect an international organ trafficking ring." I leaned forward slightly. "The question is whether you're going to cooperate with federal investigators or face charges for conspiracy and witness intimidation." Mr. Chen's hand moved completely inside his jacket now. Through my earpiece, I heard Agent Mitchell say, "Weapon confirmed. Moving now." The restaurant suddenly filled with federal agents, weapons drawn, surrounding our table before Brennan or Chen could react. Elena didn't flinch as handcuffs were placed on both men, her composure absolute. "Thomas Brennan, you're under arrest for witness intimidation, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and participation in criminal racketeering," Agent Mitchell announced. "Mr. Chen, you're under arrest for the same charges, plus carrying a concealed weapon with intent to threaten federal witnesses." As they were led away, Brennan looked back at me with professional respect mixed with obvious anger. "Ms. Harrison, you have no idea how deep this organization goes. Arresting foot soldiers won't stop the operation. Mr. Brennan, you made the same mistake your organization has been making for 3 years. You assumed that elderly victims and their families would be too frightened or confused to fight back effectively." I stood up, feeling the satisfaction of a trap successfully sprung. Some lessons can only be learned through consequences. Elena watched them disappear into federal custody, then turned to me with fierce satisfaction. "Mrs. Harrison, do you think this will really stop them?" "Elena, we've arrested the local operation and the cleanup crew. But more importantly, we've proven that victim families can fight back successfully when they have resources and determination." I gathered the settlement documents as evidence. Other victims will see what we accomplished and find the courage to come forward. Agent Mitchell returned to our table, holstering his weapon. "Margaret, Elena, you just helped us arrest the money laundering coordinators for a multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise. Chen was carrying enough documentation to prosecute their entire financial operation. What happens next? Elena asked. Next, we dismantle everything they built, recover every dollar they stole, and make sure every victim family gets justice. I looked at Elena with genuine admiration. You helped prove that some crimes are so profound that ordinary people become extraordinary when they decide to fight back. As we left the restaurant, Elena Patterson, widow, victim, survivor, had become something else entirely. A woman who helped destroy the criminal organization that murdered her husband. Some stories end with justice served. This one was ending with justice earned through courage, strategy, and the refusal to let criminals win simply because they had underestimated their victims. 6 months later, I sat in the federal courthouse gallery watching Michael receive his sentence, life in prison without possibility of parole. David had received the same sentence after his cooperation helped convict 14 additional conspirators. Dr. Hendricks and the money laundering coordinators would spend their remaining years in federal penitentiaries. 63 victims, 28 confirmed murders, $8.4 million in recovered assets, all distributed to victim families through compensation funds. The numbers represented justice, but they couldn't restore the lives that had been stolen. Mrs. Harrison, Elena Patterson approached me after the sentencing hearing. I wanted to thank you one more time. Robert's death finally has meaning now. Elena, your husband's death had meaning the moment you decided to fight for justice. You transformed tragedy into consequences for people who thought they were untouchable. I hugged her gently. Some victories are measured in lives saved rather than lives lost. Mrs. Rodriguez joined us, her eyes bright with satisfaction. Samuel would be proud of what we accomplished. These criminals learned that elderly people aren't helpless when we work together. As victim families gathered around us, sharing stories of justice finally served, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not the peace of forgiveness or reconciliation, but the peace that comes from knowing that consequences had been proportional to crimes. Agent Mitchell approached with final paperwork. Margaret, the international investigation identified organ trafficking networks in 7 countries. Your case became the foundation for prosecutions that will save hundreds of lives. What about the money they stole from me? Full restitution, plus interest and punitive damages. Your $800,000 has become $1.2 million through asset forfeiture. James handed me documentation. Margaret, you could retire very comfortably on the money recovered from their criminal enterprise. James, I am retired. This was never about money. It was about justice. I looked around at the families who had fought beside me. Besides, some lessons are more valuable than any financial compensation. What lessons? That trust, once broken by betrayal, transforms into something infinitely more dangerous: determination. That elderly people become formidable opponents when we stop accepting victimization as inevitable. That some relationships are worth destroying when they're built on crimes against vulnerable people. As I left the courthouse, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Mom, I'm sorry. I hope someday you can forgive me. I deleted the message without responding. Some apologies arrived too late to matter, from people who have become strangers wearing familiar faces. Elena Patterson was right. Robert's death had meaning now. So did the deaths of 27 other elderly patients. Their murders had been transformed into justice for families who refused to accept that their loved ones were expendable. I drove home to a house that felt different now, not because of the missing kidney, but because of the missing illusions about family, trust, and the people we choose to love. Some losses make us weaker. Others reveal strength we never knew we possessed. Margaret Elizabeth Harrison had entered that hospital as a trusting mother. She had emerged as something far more dangerous, a woman who understood that some battles can only be won by people who refuse to lose. The criminals had made one fatal error in judgment. They had assumed that age equals weakness, that isolation equals helplessness, that family loyalty equals blind trust. They had learned otherwise through consequences that would last the rest of their lives. Some stories end with forgiveness and healing. This one ended with handcuffs and justice, because sometimes love means ensuring that the people who hurt you can never hurt anyone else.